In America's century-long romance with the automobile, the passion has never burned brighter than with hot rods. Be they immaculate show cars, gritty racers, or somewhere in between, hot rods embody the core values that made this country great. Innovation, competition, improvisation, good looks, fast cars, and the relentless drive to succeed, as told by the legends, old and new, who lived it. This is the incredible true story of an American icon, the hot rod. Hello, I'm Chip Foose. It's been over a century since Henry Ford introduced the Model T. And for most of the time since, one of the most powerful undercurrents in American car culture has been hot rodding. But there are unanswered questions as we try to make sense of the hot rod's place within the broad tapestry of American culture. How have hot rods persisted when every factor that contributed to their initial growth has changed? How did the culture, once thought to be a passing fad, weave itself into our country's consciousness? What does a hot rod say about its owner? It turns out there's no one answer to any of those questions, only personal opinions and fervent beliefs in the staying power of these cars. The 1930s saw the introduction of the Deuce, the beginning of the speed equipment industry, and the creation of the SCTA. The 40s saw racing on the street and the dry lakes, the foundation of SoCal Speed Shop, the debut of Hot Rod Magazine, and the first trip to Bonneville. The 50s brought forth drag strips, teenage car culture, customizing, the NHRA, and still stands as the culture's golden age. The 60s saw the Challenger 1, the hot rod-infused Cobra program, preposterous TV cars, and SEMA. The 70s gave us wild T-buckets and the California Kid. The 80s saw the rise of the smooth look. The 90s bore witness to restoration, the street rod craze, and mainstream legitimacy. And the last decade gave us the nostalgia boom, rat rods, and a new generation of hot rodders. But mostly, the history of the hot rod is a series of glorious moments in time. Alex Exidius piloting the SoCal belly tank across El Mirage Dry Lake, Tommy Ivo engulfed in smoke in his 4-engine dragster, a gang of hot rodders taking on the mightiest race team in Europe and winning, Mickey Thompson becoming the fastest man on earth unofficially, the Doane Spencer Roadster sharing a Pebble Beach lawn with Ferraris and Duesenbergs. Stretching over decades, encompassing dozens of different types of cars, uniting generations that might otherwise have nothing in common, hot rodding is one of the narratives that binds our country together. They're still embodiments of a bygone era, the American Golden Age, which is one reason for their staying power.
I think in a culture where everything is, it's that fast, the telephones, the internet, multitasking, all these words. This is not a multitasking thing. It's simplicity, like a leap backwards. It takes it to a place where you don't have to have a radio in your car, and you really don't want to hear it anyway because there's the noise and the wind and the speed and the paint and the shine and all the stuff that goes with it. And I think that people are looking for a simpler time of their life.
Technology-wise, these cars are, over 50 years old. There is no power steering, there is no power brakes. As a matter of fact, there's no power anything. There's no heat, there's no air conditioning, there's no electric windows, there's nothing like that, which is absolutely what makes the car fun to drive. You feel the road, you feel like you're at one with the car.
Hot rodding remains a quintessentially American pursuit. Nowhere else did the seeds sown by pioneers like Wally Parks, Bob Peterson, and Vic Edelbrock bear such fruit. And in an era of outsourcing and overseas manufacturing, hot rods continue as one of the few things that are still proudly, almost defiantly, made in America.
The hot rod movement is totally American because I think it embodies a lot of things that are at the heart and soul of America. A sense of freedom, a sense of an ability to realize your own dreams, however you may choose to express that. In this case, it's through the automobile. It allows and rewards ingenuity. The hot rod movement is something that is at the core of the American spirit. It's just a way of expression of who we are and what we like to do.
While hot rods might seem like quaint anachronisms in this day and age, the fact remains that hot rods are more distinctly personal than any factory-built car could ever be. And for a dedicated rodder, driving one is akin to a religious experience.
I mean, like when I drive my hot rod, something happens to me when I get in it. I'm not the only one. I can't be alone. And so whatever that is, the freedom or the bad boy image, that's what drives it. That personal feeling, I don't know if you can put it into words.
You wouldn't think that a Las Vegas trade show would have much to do with hot rods, but SEMA, the trade organization founded in 1963 by some of the biggest names in the industry, has grown considerably in the over 4 decades since. The speed equipment industry and hot rodding in general are surprisingly vulnerable to potential legislation intended to outlaw hot rods. The threat of such action was what motivated the creation of SEMA in the first place. And today, they're still fighting the good fight. The first SEMA trade show in January 1967 was a pretty low-key affair, at least compared to what it would become. Today, it is one of the largest trade shows in the nation, filling 2 million square feet of the Las Vegas Convention Center with nearly 2,000 exhibitors and over 100,000 attendees. What started as a show for hot rod speed equipment has come to encompass the entirety of the automotive aftermarket industry. But 4 decades of growth have only reinforced the association's core identity.
We started out as the Speed Equipment Manufacturers Association with just a handful of members, mostly in Southern California, under the grandstands at Dodger Stadium where this show started in 1967. Today, we have over 6,000 companies represented in countries all over the world. And sure, you'll see other branches kind of coming off of this family tree. Hot rodding is our heart and soul.
If there's one thing linking the first SEMA show and the most recent, it's charter member Edelbrock. The company has been a fixture since that first show at Dodger Stadium, and both Vic Edelbrock Jr. and his father have been enshrined in the SEMA Hall of Fame. The decades have seen the company's fortune rise along with SEMA itself, but originally, the show brought a desperately needed commodity: credibility.
Well, SEMA brings everything together only on a much larger scale than we had in the 70s. It brings everything together where people come in and they look at this and they say, oh my God, this is really something here. And they're working with safety regulations, very important. And the love affair of the automobile is very high in the United States of America, and we're going to keep it that way.
Hot rodders, gearheads, entrepreneurs, whatever you call them, they are SEMA. We serve them. This industry, this event, and this trade show is going to change along with them, help keep their business in business for years and decades to come.
While SEMA forges into hot rodding's future, 2 museums in Southern California, each named for a hot rod legend and built with the money generated by the hot rod industry, are preserving the memorable cars and iconic moments of the past. The Peterson Automotive Museum on Wilshire Boulevard in the heart of Los Angeles has been home to one of the finest car collections on Earth since 1994.
The Peterson Automotive Museum was established to show to the world the impact that the automobile has had on culture, particularly Southern California culture, but really throughout the country and indeed the world. Its purpose is to educate, and through, as we say, the window of the automobile, we learn about art and history and sociology, engineering, design, and passion.
Appropriately for a museum founded by and named after the publisher of Hot Rod magazine. The Peterson has hosted events for many of the culture's heroic figures, along with an almost unparalleled group of history's most significant hot rods, like the Doane Spencer Roadster, El Caballo, Ed Roth's Outlaw, the Alumacoupe, and the Niekamp Roadster.
The Peterson Museum celebrates the history of the automobile and its impact on American life and culture, using Los Angeles as the primary example. And if you're doing that, you can't help but focus in, at least partially, on hot rods, And since we've opened, we've always had a hot rod gallery here. We talk about the different kinds of approaches to customizing cars for performance or appearance, and all of the countless ways people have changed their vehicles, have tried to evolve them for different circumstances, sometimes very highly targeted things, very highly specialized things. You can't have a museum named the Peterson Museum and not talk about hot rods. They're too much a part of who we are as Southern Californians.
40 miles away in Pomona stands a temple for hot rodding that was a lifelong ambition of Bob Peterson's longtime friend and colleague, Wally Parks. The Wally Parks NHRA Motorsports Museum, unlike the Peterson, is entirely dedicated to hot rods of every shape and size, as befits Pomona's place in hot rod history.
The first ever NHRA sanctioned drag race was held here at Pomona Drag Strip in April of 1953. So it's really natural to have it literally on the same piece of property. And of course now the NHRA season begins and ends with the Winter Nationals and the Auto Club Finals. It's a centralized mecca for drag racing right here.
The museum opened its doors in 1998, and within its walls is a collection of hot rods to rival the Petersons. With the SoCal Belly Tank, Pearson Brothers Coupe, Barney Navarro's Lakester, Tommy Ivo's T-Bucket, and Mickey Thompson's Challenger 1 representing but a fraction of the cars on display. It's almost too many hot rods for one place.
We outgrew the place the day we opened, but we try to move the exhibits around and change the display so every time you come here, it'll have a new look. You can see something else that you hadn't seen before.
We live in a culture steeped in nostalgia, but drag racing fans take that one step further, with sanctioned events featuring dragsters that haven't been new in decades. Every year, the Wally Parks NHRA Motorsports Museum organizes the California Hot Rod Reunion, a gathering of vintage drag racing cars at one of the culture's iconic venues, Famoso Raceway, just outside Bakersfield. It's yet another way that a modern audience can connect with the hot rods of yesteryear. Step onto the asphalt at Famoso, and you can almost feel the history percolate through your bones. Famoso was the site of the famed 1959 March Meet, perhaps the most significant event in drag racing history, where Art Chrisman won top eliminator over a field that included a very young Don Garlits. Today, the strip remains largely unchanged from the early days, giving events there a nostalgic feel all their own. Throw in the hundreds of old school race cars that have convened for the Hot Rod Reunion, and it's like a step backwards in time to the glory days of drag racing.
Famoso's been open since 1954, and you know, I was a kid growing up in England, and I was reading about it. So I mean, you know, it's a mecca. It's a sort of hallowed ground, and thankfully over the years, you know, it didn't get too improved, and that's kind of what makes it cool, is that it's an old drag strip like it used to be. You know, this is what drag racing is all about.
Hot rod culture is rooted in competition, and the Hot Rod Reunion is no different. Drivers in 9 different classes compete throughout the weekend. Series points and personal pride are on the line, but the true goal is something else, something difficult to define.
Our lives are very complicated. You know, we're over-communicated, and this takes us back to a time when life was simpler. We didn't have cell phones and iPods and all those other things, and you know, we try to run the event very loosely. We don't have a lot of rules, and I think people just love that. It's the greatest nostalgia vintage drag racing event on the calendar. This is drag racing, you know, as we all read about as kids.
I started driving my mother's 53 Oldsmobile 70 miles an hour. I've driven everything there is at the drag strip, and here they have everything. So if somebody wanted to come see, all the stars are here, the guys come, they sign autographs, and any kind of car you'd want to see, from a 1930-something Willys or Roadster or something, up to a modern-day type stuff. So it's just a neat event.
The culmination of the Hot Rod Reunion features cars that haven't been run competitively for decades. As the sun sets, a standing room only crowd, larger than for any single race of the weekend, gathers to watch legendary dragsters of the 50s and 60s, some of them driven by the men who made them famous, process down the quarter mile of asphalt. This parade is called the Cackle Fest, and it's perhaps the best expression of drag racing's deep-seated connection with the past that you'll ever see. The featured attraction was Mickey Thompson's favorite dragster, the Assault 1, ably piloted by his son Danny.
This car's been sitting in the museum. It hasn't run for 50 years. We'll go out there and stage and fire this thing up and light it up. It's got 17% nitromethane in it right now, so you get to sit in the seat and cry with all the fumes and everything, and the smell and all that it makes you feel good. And we got to go down first with this car, just getting that and watching all of that history all come back to life. It was a pretty awesome night. I mean, you get that many cars of nostalgic proportion all in one place and everything. It was amazing. The other forms of drag racing are so expensive now. It's nice to see this come back and see a lot of these guys that didn't get the credit that they got in the day start to get the credit again. So that's pretty cool.
Those cars are too old to race. They're probably not safe, but you know, you all get goosebumps when they go down the track and they fire up, especially if it's got the original driver in it, like Tommy Ivo or Chris Caramazzini or somebody like that. How cool has it got to be 70 or 80 years old and get back in a race car that you raced 40 or 50 years ago? I mean, it's a time machine. It's a bomb also, but it's a time machine, you know?
Wally Parks once called the Hot Rod Reunion a show and tell of the best of everything. And today, there's no better place to be catapulted into the days when drag racing, like hot rod culture itself, was still young at heart. Cultures evolve and styles change. Hot rods are no different. It took the decisions and inspirations of nearly 8 decades to get from a Model T Lakester to a modern street rod. At the heart of everything is competition. The desire to run faster, build better, and look cooler than the guy driving next to you. And the gap between performance and styling is smaller than you might think, as purely practical considerations made decades ago are often co-opted by customizers to create cars that tie into the past while attempting to say something new. Vic Edelbrock Sr. and Ed Iskandarian stripped the fenders, running boards, and windshields off their cars to make them lighter. Rat Rodders leave them off because it gives the car a fearsome profile. Dean Batchelor and Alex Exidius handcrafted aluminum panels for the SoCal Streamliner because that was the only way they could get the airflow they wanted. Dean Jeffries handcrafted aluminum panels for the Manta Ray because he wanted to create a car unlike anything ever built. The Pearson brothers chopped and raked the top of their coupe to reduce the car's height and thus improve aerodynamics. The Barris brothers chopped the top of the Hirohata Merc because it looked cool. Doane Spencer raised the clearance on his Roadster because the road conditions in the Carrera Panamericana demanded it. Troy Ladd built his Orange Highboy because he wanted to evoke the styling cues of the past. Early Rodders used the Ford Flathead V8 because it was the best engine available at that price. Mike Herman built Flatheads, which were obsolete long before he was born, as a way of connecting with the culture's traditions. As the nostalgia craze continues and hot rodding draws more and more inspiration from its golden age, the question then becomes, what's next?
I think hot rod always has embraced something of the past and is pushing the envelope like the best racers, like the best developers, like the best engineers. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen. It'll just get better and better as it gets more and more advanced, but it's going to bring all of its past with it.
I think there's a great future in hot rodding. I think they'll always look back at what started it with great admiration. And I think the future of hot rodding is just beginning. And whether my grandchildren are going to understand the hot rods, I just can't tell you, but I sure hope they do.
It's such a part of American history and culture. How could it ever go away? I mean, it splits off and it does different things. I mean, within the last 10 years, you've had this whole new revival of the traditional hot rod, kind of a younger generation that's kind of jumped in. It will never die. It will always grow in one way or another.
I think the generations coming up, like I said, if they like the earlier styles, they'll go to the rat rod deal. If they like the later machines, they'll go to the Camaros and the Mustangs. It's all parts of the same soup. You just kind of pick out the part you like, and that's what you go with. Some people go drag racing. Some people go dry lakes racing. Some people want to build show cars and never drive it. Some people want to drive their hot rods. That's what's great about it. It's so diverse and so big that you pick out the part that you like, and that's what you concentrate on.
And I think as long as we have a country where there's the opportunity to build and create and the confidence to do something, and you're dedicated enough to see it through, I think there's going to always be a place for hot rodding in this society. It may not be as we know it, but I think there will always be a hot rodding spirit, and I think you will always have hot rodders.
People trying to predict the future of this hobby, how could they possibly do that? Because it's been predicted that it wouldn't go past the 40s or the 50s or the 60s and the 70s and the gas crisis and everything. I mean, and it's gone away and it's come back and it's done, and right now it's bigger than it's ever been. I can't predict it. I just know that people respect good work. They enjoy hot rodding. They enjoy their cars. I just know that that will go on.
While the future of hot rods has yet to be written, the past is something to be celebrated. We've explored how hot rod culture started, how it grew, how it changed, and where it is today. And we've only scratched the surface. The great thing, maybe even the best thing about hot rod culture, is that it's so varied, so broad, so creative, that it's almost impossible to summarize. But it wouldn't be so without the hard work, brilliance, and passion of thousands upon thousands of people, many of whom are no longer with us. It's to them that we dedicate this show, the men who helped make hot rod culture one of the most vibrant and distinctive in American history. I'm Chip Foose. Thanks for watching.